The world was vast and wild, and for those who walked it in the earliest days, it was a place of constant uncertainty. In a small valley, surrounded by towering cliffs and dense forests, a tribe called the Ember Folk made their home. They were not many, just a handful of men, women, and children, but they clung to each other as tightly as the earth held its rocks. Among them was Kale, a young man whose eyes always seemed to linger on the horizon, searching for something beyond what his people knew. He was strong, with quick hands and a sharper mind than most. Beside him was Laura, a girl with a quiet strength, her hands often busy weaving baskets or tending to the wounded. Her laughter, rare but warm, was a balm to the tribe during the long, harrowing nights. And then there was old Kor, the elder whose stories of stars and spirits both terrified and comforted the children huddled at his feet. The nights were the hardest. When the sun dipped below the horizon, the valley transformed. The soft rustling of leaves became whispers of predators creeping closer. The cries of owls echoed like spirits haunting the living. The Ember Folk retreated into their cave, piling stones at the entrance and pressing close together, their breathing shallow as they strained to hear the world outside. Kale hated the dark. He hated how it made them weak, how it stole their strength and turned their hearts to water. One day, while foraging near a river, he saw something that changed everything. A storm had passed, and a tree, struck by lightning, smoldered with an orange glow. Curious, Kale approached cautiously. The heat made him step back at first, but he was mesmerized by the flickering light. He broke a long branch and poked at the strange phenomenon until the fire leapt to the branch, creating a smaller version of itself. Kale returned to the cave that evening, carrying the burning branch like a trophy. His tribe recoiled at first, wary of the strange, moving light, but as the chill of the evening set in, Kale placed the fire at the center of the cave, its warmth spreading through the small space. "See?" he said, holding his hands to the glow. "It doesn't harm unless you let it." Old Kor was the first to step closer, his weathered hands reaching toward the warmth. The others followed, their faces bathed in the soft light. For the first time in as long as they could remember, the Ember Folk didn't tremble when the night fell. The fire's crackling filled the silence that had once been dominated by fear. But fire was not an easy master. The next day, the fire began to die, its once bright flames shrinking to embers. Kale panicked. He threw dried leaves and sticks onto it, but nothing happened. Laura, watching him, picked up a handful of dry grass and blew softly on the embers. To their amazement, the fire roared back to life. "It needs to breathe," she said with a small smile. The tribe learned quickly. They fed the fire with sticks and logs, and they guarded it jealously, knowing it was their lifeline. The fire became their heart, a constant presence that allowed them to venture further into the world. It scared away predators, warmed their food, and lit their gatherings as Old Kor told tales of how the fire came from the sky, a gift from the spirits. But fire demanded responsibility. One evening when Kale was out hunting, a gust of wind carried the flames too close to the dry reeds at the edge of the cave. The fire spread, threatening to consume everything. It was Laura who acted first, beating at the flames with a damp hide. The others joined her, and after a frantic struggle, they contained the fire. That night, Kale and Laura sat together by the rekindled flames, their faces streaked with soot. "This fire," Kale said, staring into its depths, "it's alive. It's like us. It needs care, or it'll turn against us." Laura nodded, her fingers tracing the charred edge of her tunic. "But it's worth it. For the first time, we're not just surviving, Kale. We're living." Generations passed, but the Ember folk never forgot the lessons of fire. They passed down the stories of Kale and Laura, of how they had tamed the first flame and learned to live by its light. Even now, when their descendants gather around a campfire or a glowing hearth, they feel its ancient comfort. The fire speaks to something deep within them, a primal memory of a time when its light saved them from the dark. And though they no longer live in caves or fear the howl of predators, they still carry the warmth of that first flame in their hearts.